All right, guys, welcome back to the course. So the last couple lectures, we've been looking at editing programs like Premiere that you could use to create your marketing videos. Now, you can see they're pretty powerful pieces of software, but the sad news in all of this is that you still have to do most of the work yourself. There's really no feature yet where you can say, okay, here's all my footage and please cut it together for me. Now, if you, for some reason, don't want to do that basic level of work, well, then you got to hire people to do it for you. And actually, we're going to talk about outsourcing in a later lecture, but let's assume that for now, you do actually have to do that basic level of editing yourself. Well, first of all, let me tell you, it's really not that bad. Put on a good podcast and kind of just space out as you do it. The good news is that you can make a ton of progress with editing by creating a thing called a rough cut. Now, a rough cut is a quick and dirty edited version of your video. Not dirty as in adult dirty, but dirty as in it won't be perfect. And that is perfectly fine. What a rough cut basically is when you take all your footage, you stick it together, you get rid of all the bad takes, all the retakes, and then you sync the audio together, and then you pick which camera you want to use if you're doing multicam. Now you might think that I described everything you do in editing, but no, not really. After that fact, then you have to do actual editing. That's when you put in your B-roll. That's when you put in your time lapses. That's when you put in your text, titles, effects, transitions, all that stuff. A rough cut is basically just the bare basics. Now you don't have to move anything on the timeline significantly, and it should be ready for you to just kind of throw things on top. In rough cuts, usually you also do some corrections where like maybe the microphone accidentally came into the frame. You might, crop it then. Or maybe one of the lights went out, so you took out that section. Or maybe the colors are off, so you did a little adjusting to the brightness. The idea is this: by creating a rough cut, you can get to see an approximation of what your finished video will look like. You'll get to see a rough idea of what it sounds like, how long it is, what the pacing or rhythm of the whole video is like. Rough cuts are a great first step in the post-production process because it can also let you know if you need to go back and reshoot anything. Generally speaking, the editing process will go filming, right? Then you have all the raw data. You might do some processing to the videos if you want to, like downsampling, which we talked about before in the camera lecture. And then you do the rough cut, and the rough cut is the quickest. You stitch it together, gives you the best kind of overall look at your piece. And then you go into multiple rounds of editing or just one round. So you go from rough cut to final cut. In our case for videos, we film it, then we downsample the video, then rough cut goes to text and title cut, which is kind of like an intermediate cut where we add in text and titles, and then it goes to people who add graphics, illustrations, animations, and all the other random stuff you've seen in here. Now, it's really gonna be up to you what happens after the rough cut. That's gonna come down to your process and whatever you figure out works for you. It also just depends on how many people you're working with, and if you're doing all of the process, and also how many videos you're making. So anyway, how do we make a rough cut? Well, in general, look for the best take in your video, and then cut out the others. Really, the easiest way of doing that is to use what I call the scrubber, but it's also called the playhead, and to just scan through your video looking for each individual cut. When it comes to the visual, look for takes where people look their best and aren't making weird faces or movements. When it comes to sound, well, listen for the best read of a line. Which time actually sounds the best or most like the mood you're trying to create. Also, if you notice any weird stuff like hums, bumps, cars, people screaming outside in the window, don't use those takes if possible. Really, it's that simple. You take all your videos, you throw it into the timeline, you sync up the audio, and then you cut out the bad takes. Then you might do some light rearranging or picking which camera to use. When you're done with that, you're done with the rough cut. That is literally it. But past that, there are some ways that you can speed up this process or at least do it more efficiently. So I'm gonna go over 6 different tips that you can use to make this process work a little better. So number 1 is always have your script or storyboard with you while you edit. Really don't try to edit from memory. Use your script or a shot list as a reminder and you'll stay on track knowing exactly what comes next. Sometimes it's really hard to tell inside the editing what's going on. Also, with having the script, you can see where people deviate from it. So a lot of times you might have 4 different takes. One of them sounds the best, but then you look at it and it doesn't actually match the script perfectly, so you might end up choosing another one. The second thing is it really helps to edit in a sequential order. Start at the beginning of your script or storyboard and then edit there first, then going straight through to the end. Editing in order can help you from getting confused about what shots or pieces go where. Don't try to jump back and forth because a lot of times it ends up happening is you do the second half, then you do the first half, and you'll just miss a chunk. And then when you make your rough cut, oops, there's a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't supposed to be in there. Number 3 is while you're editing, use the audio waveform as a guide. Now you can see in the actual timeline when you have the audio, it has a waveform, right? It goes up when people are speaking and it's loud and goes down when it's quiet. Now you can see exactly where people start and stop talking, where they take long pauses, smack their lips, cough, whatever. These noises make very distinctive shapes inside the waveform, so if you see them, you'll know, oh, they're about to mess up. This is honestly one of the easiest ways of going through your rough cut, is just when you first look at it, go and cut out the sections where no one's talking. That's an easy way to tell when you just look at the waveform, no one's talking. Another thing you can do a lot of times is you'll notice filler words or things you're not supposed to be saying, like right? Well, or Typically, if you've done this enough, and this happens with me, I can look at the waveform and actually spot those words because they make a very unique waveform repeatedly. I don't even have to listen to the tape to figure it out. Number 4 is when making your cuts, make sure to leave extra space before and after each take so you can shift things around if necessary. Maybe it's an extra second or so, whatever, it's fine. Remember, you don't need to be precise in this cut yet. Number 5 is don't add any transitions. Just do them later. If you add them now, you kind of get stuck in the order that you put the clips in, stuck with the camera angles you might want. Generally, with the rough cut, you want to be able to easily move them around. Number 6 is add temporary titles if there are spots where they ought to go. Don't worry about creating any nicely designed or animated titles. Just create quick placeholders and then replace it later with the real thing. Repeat this process until you're done, and then when you are actually done, give the whole thing a watch. You should get a nice sense of accomplishment from watching it all the way through, and you should because you're much closer to getting the whole thing done. But at the same time, it might feel like you're watching a low-budget movie. Well, the edits are probably a little bit off, the pacing too, and that's perfectly fine. A rough cut gives you a starting point where you can focus on fixing some of the finer issues, like, is each cut synced up with the audio? Are all the effects in there correctly? And then obviously incorporating all of the titles you might want. So anyway, don't take too much time with your rough cut. Again, do a quick and dirty run through your footage, assemble your video, and make your plans from there. It's a big item to cross off your post-production checklist for sure. Also worth talking about is that because the process is so simple, and it's so repeatable, this is often one of the things that people will outsource. You can always get some of the cheapest people to do it because anybody with half a brain can do this. They can just look through and go, oh, don't talk there, don't talk there. Occasionally you might have some issues where they don't know which take to choose, but what you can do is you can just watch the whole thing and put little markers for them so they know this is the good one. Sound good? Okay, see you in the next lecture.